Today, we are diving into a story that honestly feels like it's straight out of a political thriller. We've got a former president, a late dictator, and a criminal conviction that's been decades in the making. We're going to break down the recent verdict against France's Nicolas Sarkozy and the really tangled history that got him here. It really all boils down to this one question. How did a celebrated political handshake, one that saw Muammar Gaddafi literally pitch his tent in Paris, completely fall apart and turn into airstrikes, a revolution, and at the end of it all, a guilty verdict for a former head of state? Okay, let's get into it. So, we'll start with the most recent chapter in this pretty long saga, the verdict. It was delivered just recently, and it sent some serious shockwaves through the French political world. And here's the headline, stark and frankly, historic. The court found Nicolas Sarkozy, who led France from 2007 to 2012, guilty of criminal conspiracy, all of it connected to his relationship with the former Libyan regime. But, the real story here is what's behind that headline. Because while he was found guilty on that big conspiracy charge, the court actually acquitted him on 3 other major charges: corruption, misuse of Libyan public funds, and illegal election campaign funding. So it was a much more complex and split decision than it looks at first glance. Which brings us to the heart of the case. What exactly was this criminal conspiracy he was convicted of? Well, prosecutors built their whole case around something they called a corruption pact. So, to put it simply, the prosecution argued that a deal was struck. Gaddafi's regime would secretly funnel money to Sarkozy's team, and in return, Sarkozy would use his political power to grant favors and, this is the big one, to help rehabilitate the dictator's image on the world stage. And the accusation wasn't just about taking some cash under the table. No, prosecutors argued this was a premeditated plan, a full-on conspiracy to break the law in order to win the most powerful office in all of France. And you can really see how this all built up over time. Prosecutors traced the whole thing back to 2005, when Sarkozy was still the interior minister. Then, 2 years later, bam, he wins the presidency. And just a few months after that victory, Muammar Gaddafi gets the full red carpet treatment in Paris. He even set up his famous Bedouin tent right near the Élysée Palace. It was a massive diplomatic moment. And this is where the story takes its most dramatic and, you could say, ironic turn. The relationship that started with that huge state visit would end with a military intervention led by the very same French president. I mean, just look at this. It really captures the incredible reversal. On one side, you have 2007. Sarkozy is the first Western leader to welcome Gaddafi back from being an international pariah. But then you jump to the other side, just 4 years later in 2011, and Sarkozy's France is leading the charge on NATO airstrikes that directly helped the rebels who would ultimately capture and kill Gaddafi. It's an almost unbelievable turnaround. Now, to really understand why this latest guilty verdict is such a big deal, you have to see it not as a one-off thing, but as part of a much bigger pattern of legal troubles for the former president. This verdict for criminal conspiracy marks Nicolas Sarkozy's 3rd separate criminal conviction. 3. That number alone is historic. It's a first for any former French head of state. His other convictions are for 2 totally different scandals. One was for trying to illegally get information from a judge, and another was for massive overspending on his failed 2012 re-election campaign. And because of this pattern, he's even been stripped of France's highest honor, the Legion of Honor. And these convictions have had very real consequences. This isn't just a legal fight on paper. For that first conviction, he was sentenced to a year, which he served with an electronic tag. In fact, get this, he was actually wearing that ankle monitor when he walked into the courtroom for parts of this very Libya trial. But even with a verdict handed down, this story is, well, it's far from over. In fact, the final days of the trial just added more drama and mystery to the whole affair, leaving us with some pretty big lingering questions. So in this stunning, almost unbelievable twist, the key witness, a man named Ziad Taqiyuddin, this is the guy who originally claimed he personally delivered suitcases of cash from Gaddafi's regime. He died of a heart attack just 48 hours before the verdict was announced. His testimony was, for years, absolutely central to the case. So what's next? Well, Sarkozy is expected to appeal this conviction, which is just going to drag the legal process out even longer.
And at the same time, there's a completely separate investigation going on, looking into whether that key witness, Taqi was pressured to change his story. The legal web just keeps getting more and more tangled.
It all leaves us with this final, bigger question. I mean, this trial wasn't just about one man. It was about money, diplomacy, and ambition at the highest possible levels. And when a leader's past gets put on trial like this, what does it really show us about the nature of power itself?